It's Delaware, Monday, March 3rd. I'm Peter MacArthur. Glad you could be with us today. Every now and again, we like to make sure that you are up to speed on what is happening in the jobs market and all those things that factor into where employment stands. So we call in Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark, to help us out with that, and that's the case today. Chris, hi, how are you?
Hey, happy Monday morning to you. It's great to be on the show.
Yeah, good to have you on the show to start off on Monday. I appreciate it. It's been a minute since we talked, Chris, and really a lot's happened since then. This year's been pretty active. How has the job market been impacted, and what are you seeing in terms of job openings and current unemployment trends?
First things first, the general sentiment at the start of the year is that the job picture was going to improve. A couple of sound bites. Unemployment claims did go up. They're about 242,000. That's higher than it's been, not by much, but it is a higher number to note. And what's interesting in it is 5,000 of those unemployment numbers are federal government contractors, not federal workers, but contractors. They're not in that number. So we're just starting to see the implication of changes in how the federal government is doing things. Now, as far as job creation, 143,000 in January. That's less than expected and less than previous months. However, there's always seems to be this adjustment. November and December were adjusted up by over 100,000 jobs. And there were jobs in a lot of industries that had not been hiring. That's kind of an interesting one. It's the last Biden-era jobs report, and more, a lot really has changed, right? So much has changed. One of the things I think that's most impactful is, over the last number of months, we've talked about where jobs are created and how many per month. There's been a good run of federal government jobs created. The high number can be as many as 30,000. So I think that's going to have an impact on future months. Private industry has a way of, taking over and creating jobs, but part of our job creation engine has been the federal government the last 3 years. Obviously, that's not going to be the case in a lot of things. And then the final biggie is it seems like companies aren't doing a lot of layoffs. Of course, the federal government is beginning to shed some jobs. But what is interesting is the job environment is just a little bit more difficult for those that lose jobs to find work. Say the average is 5 months to find a job. It's taking about 6 months now. And I think that, I think people feel that at home.
People that are seeking jobs, Chris, obviously they put a lot of work into those resumes, but what a lot of people might not realize is that hard work might not ever be seen by a recruiter. So I wanted to ask you about an explanation of why optimizing a resume for an ATS is so important and how job seekers can improve their chances of at least getting noticed.
Pete, it's a really great topic and discussion, and it's what seems to come into places all the time is that I have this really well-done resume, and I never hear from anybody. So kind of a shocking fact. 3 out of 4 resumes never even reach a human, in human resources. They get filtered out by technology. That technology is called Applicant Tracking Systems. So it's not just big companies. It's pretty much every business that has some kind of technology that collects resumes. So if your resume isn't in the format that's ATS or Applicant Tracking friendly, it's like it never existed.
So, that's a bit of a game changer. You have this great resume, but it can't help you if no one ever sees it. So talk a little bit more about what ATS is and why is it that companies rely on this technology?
Well, I'm hearing that in a market like this, a business may get 1,200 resumes. That's really hard for a human to go through. So the idea is you have this sort of software that acts like a Google or Bing for, those employees. It scans and sorts and ranks resumes automatically, and it helps companies quickly identify those that are qualified for a job when sometimes there's a mountain of applications. So it can be a lifesaver, right? The catch, if your resume doesn't fit into how that ATS works, you might not make it past that first hurdle.
Oh, is it proper to maybe call it like a search engine for resumes?
That's exactly what it is.
It?
It
Yes.
scans each resume, and it looks for your skills, your job titles, your keywords. And if your resume lacks some of those things or isn't formatted in a way, it's automatically rejected, which, again, this is probably like the number one thing we hear is, how do I get my resume seen?
All right, so you've made us aware about this. What are some maybe best practices to ensure that my resume makes it through this ATS and actually reaches someone?
Yeah, so first things first, stay away from things like PDF. Just use Word or Google Docs formats. That plays nice with the software. And then, we try to make our resumes really sharp. We use tables or charts or graphics or things like that. I think the systems don't read that. And then keep everything simple. No fancy headers or footers. And the hardest part is you want to optimize for certain job-specific keywords. They kind of mirror the exact language from a job posting. So you really have to almost customize the keywords specific to the job that you're looking for. And if you do that, you're more likely to get noticed by the software. And if humans are involved, it's just like anything else that sorts out all the work. And I think people have better results this way.
Yeah, those are great nuggets, Chris. Thanks for that. We started talking, you and I, during the pandemic, and I'm curious about in that 5 years since, how has Delaware performed when it comes to job creation, Chris?
First of all, I can't believe it's been 5 years.
I know.
But it's a question and a timeline that it's been such a roller coaster ride when it comes to the economy and jobs and everything that's gone with it. So I was really curious to kind of see how Delaware is doing with job creation and comparing it to the entire U.S. So what's interesting is the U.S. created 4.4% of new jobs in its total workforce, and so did Delaware. But what does that translate in a state with 1 million employees and roughly 500 civilian employees? It means we created about 20,000 new jobs, and a lot of them are in transportation and trade. Think e-commerce, warehouse, logistics, a lot of local government, a lot of healthcare, some finance and construction. But what surprised me is that whole hospitality and leisure and hotel thing has not come back fully. IT jobs, which we always know are those great high-paying jobs, they're down in the state. And that does reflect the broader picture nationally as well, that IT and AI has created a new story there.
Yeah, most certainly. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about college grads. And you can kind of understand the thinking here, but a lot of them feel like they should wait for that perfect job. And some of them are even hesitant to get contract work or temp work. How do you address this concern? What advice would you give them to navigate the market more effectively?
Well, I didn't mention it in the opening question, Pete, but recent college grads are one of the groups that are taking longer to find work than they have in the last few years during things. So this is a very relevant question. And, college students are going to school for something specific. They love their degree. They want to use it right away. Yeah. But frankly, some of them have been laid off or they're waiting. So the real key, I think, is to realize that a very high percentage of the world is using contractor consulting or temporary work. And, most of us struggle to network. So why not use a firm to help represent you as your agent to get something? Consider a firm that has customer relationships and jobs you'd like to work in. You may not be able to get on the inside, but those firms are using temporaries today if they're not hiring, and it can be quicker. But most importantly is, I think, and it sounds a bit old-fashioned, but getting out, working, meeting people, seeing how people do things. Well, I wouldn't be the first one to say that a college grad change their mind and get new ideas. So I think getting out and doing work that of any kind is really an important part of that first job experience for a college grad. Of course, we want the perfect one, but getting out there and making it happen and just putting some money in your pocket is not a bad thing.
Yeah. I never asked you this before, and I'm going to ask you before we hang up this morning. Does being in Delaware help placers be a more effective service for job seekers? We talk about the Delaware way, and you just mentioned relationships and contacts and such, and we take such great pride in the fact that Delaware is, more like a 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon as opposed to a 6 degrees. Does it help you in the effectiveness of what you and your colleagues do, Chris?
Well, certainly it helps that this state is known for and does answer the phone. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not hard. So it isn't hard for us to help somebody open a door, even if we don't have relationships behind the door.
Okay.
So being small, it does help a lot. Being around 50 some years, Yeah, that has an advantage, and it also has that downside that, like, we've always kind of been here, right? So I think a good firm, anyone in my space, has relationships that can help the workforce. Placers has money, but so do other people, just to be fair. And certainly, I think that in a state like this, well, I think in anything, who you know in your job search is everything. So placers should be a big part of that.
Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark, joining us here on WDEL. Great to speak with you. Nice way to start off the week, Chris. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Chris Burkhard at Placer Staffing. It is March 3rd.